Welcome to the official school year starting. This is big week two. Stanford, have you guys started yet?
We're on a quarter system, and so we start a little later than later than the semester schools, and finish a touch later. So we haven't started yet. We start classes 2 weeks from yesterday.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I will start without further ado. This webinar is a long time in the making. We have a lot of fun with our champions. We were talking in the green room right before that. Paul was kind of at ground zero in the inception of ICL Academy. And I'm just going to get this out of the way first before I introduce Paul. Um, there are people in your life that when you enter tournaments, you kind of look up to, you're always looking at number one players. And in my lifetime, Paul Goldstein pretty much checked every box that I wanted to achieve when I was coming up in the juniors. Every tournament, winner was Paul Goldstein. When I met him, which he wouldn't remember because when you're a little older, the younger guys, you kind of know them, but they're below you, and couldn't have been a nicer guy. Like you have certain people when you play that have egos, and Paul was one of those players who was just would dominate you and just make you feel good after, and just always such a class act. But my dream was always to play tennis at Stanford. And unfortunately, even as the higher as ranked as I got, that was not in the cards for me. But to see Paul go on, and I mean, just to start with junior career, I mean, not, it's a huge deal to win national tournaments, but to do it the way Paul did consecutively was pretty amazing. Just a junior standout, number one in the country, uh, kind of as long as I can remember. But then going to college and at Stanford and being, I believe, because I don't really look it up, but I believe an All-American every year that you were there. That's such a huge accomplishment, coupled with a bunch of NCAA titles. How many titles did you get there?
My classmates, first of all, thanks, Kirk. It's humbling to hear you these words, and I appreciate it. But yeah, no, my classmates and I were the first class in NCAA tennis history to win 4 consecutive team championships.
I mean,
And
that
so,
is just to play in the NCAAs is always a treat, and to win the whole thing 4 times. I think the closest we got with any of our champions, I think one of your fellow classmates, Carrie Walsh in volleyball, did it a couple times. She was on here right before summer break, but I don't think they're the same way you
you went
did.
on to win multiple gold medals too. I can't say the same.
No, but also an awesome pro career. I mean,
Oh
seeing
yeah.
seeing you come out and play, at the Open, and we're watching you there. I don't know full rank. I mean, I think you were definitely top 100, you top 60. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
some wins. I remember when I was mentioning you and we were talking to one of our champions, a guy you may or may not have heard of, Novak Djokovic, and I mentioned your name. He said, "Yeah, yeah, Paul beat me." So I think there's a W over Nole, if I'm not mistaken.
There is. It was when he was first getting started on tour. It was first round of Australian Open in Melbourne, and that is the last time in 2006, and that's the last time he lost first round in a Grand Slam. So
So
he's won
he,
something like 70 straight first round slam matches, which is just remarkable.
yeah, it's
Just
it's a little
remarkable.
it's a little scary, the level of tennis that we're seeing. Obviously just coming out of the U.S. Open. I mean, not on script, but what your thoughts? You had a bunch of players in the qualies, but just that level of Taylor and Yannick, and I mean what the men's game is like now.
Well, Sinner is just phenomenal, and I hadn't had a chance to watch him play in person until this year. And I am really impressed. I go back to, I was fortunate, had lunch with Roger Federer this summer, and he made a comment that really stuck with me. We were talking tennis for 20, 30 minutes, which was a dream come true, just incredibly, and he's incredibly insightful and just humble and just incredible. I just really enjoyed that conversation. But he said, look, the best players in the world are the best movers in the world, full stop, period. And you take a guy like Sinner who's hitting the ball huge off of both wings, but the guy covers the court as well, if not better than anybody. in the world. Long legs, so he covers a lot of ground with one leg, but with one stride. But he can change direction really well. He's serving phenomenal. But I'm telling you, if you can cover the court, you give yourself a chance in any match you play.
That's an awesome sort of tidbit, and I don't believe the stats. It kept saying he was 6'2". I've seen Sinner. Sinner's not 6'2". That is just
He
not
looks
true.
6'4" to me, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what 6'2" they're talking about, but no, pretty amazing. And even like seeing Taylor improve his movement, and you can see
Oh,
what it does, day to
no,
day.
100%. I remember watching Taylor when he was 16, 17 years old and actually recruiting him. And he was such a clean striker of the ball. And the only question was, is he going to be able to sort of be able to cover the court and turn defense into offense? And you're right. I mean, him and his team, Mike Russell, his longtime coach,
Nike.
who I was a peer of mine, has done a phenomenal job. And he is covering the court so much better and allowing his, how good of a ball striker he is. To sort of come through. And yeah, his court coverage has been phenomenal. And
What
that's
a
what you need. That's what you need to have those kinds of breakthroughs.
No, it's amazing. It's so fun to have you. I feel like this should be kind of I feel like it should be one of those like three-part Netflix series because I want to cover a lot with you. I want to cover, your personal experiences. I want to share with a lot of the people that are on here, talk about transitioning, juniors, college, pros, comes up all the time. I mean, everyone, as many of the names of ICL students, and they're dreaming big, they're fighting hard, they're training hard, and to hear your journey first, and then get into a little bit about Stanford is the ultimate, right? Being a Stanford athlete is kind of an amazing goal to set, and we hope to be continuing a great relationship with the school. But just to, we'll kind of switch to a little bit about that balance of academics with training. So we'll start with your journey first. When did you, and we kind of have this format like with our 6 Ps that I mentioned to you, but when did you first sort of become passionate about tennis, and what was the time that switch that made from being a passion into becoming a real purpose of yours?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I grew up on the East Coast, Washington, D.C., and throughout my high school, through elementary, middle school, high school career, I went to a sort of, for lack of any other term, a regular school. Wasn't an academy. It wasn't predicated for a sport or even tennis. And I grew up with two older brothers, athletic family, played lots of sports. Tennis was one of the sports I played, starting at about 7 or 8 years old, I think. The summer I was 9 years old, or I turned 9 years old, I went to a all sports summer camp. Again, had been playing a little bit of tennis. Both my older brothers went as well. And the next summer, my brothers went back to that all sports summer camp. But instead of going back to that camp, I just played tennis all summer. So it was the summer I turned 10 where I think it went from a hobby or one of the many sports I played to a passion. And the way I got into tennis is a neat little story. I was at a buddy's house. Uh, and it was a play date. And I was 8, 9 years old. And his mom comes running into the living room saying, "Oh my gosh, I totally forgot, John. You have a tennis lesson in 30 minutes. Paul, I'm so sorry. We wouldn't have had you over if I remembered you had this lesson. But do you mind just watching him take a lesson for an hour?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I watched my buddy take this tennis lesson. And then we hit a little bit afterwards. And his coach said, "You want to take some lessons and play some tennis?" And she was running a really good junior program at the time. I said, "Yeah, sure." So that summer, instead of going to uh, Lake Squam, New Hampshire to go to
Yeah.
summer camp, I think we paid $99 for the summer, and my parents would drop me off at 9 a.m. every morning without anything scheduled. I'd walk down to the deli for lunch at noon. There's a pool next door, take a dip. They'd pick me up at 5 or 6 p.m. and I'd play like 4 or 5 hours of tennis every day over the summer. And that's when I really got into it. The summer I turned 10. And I kept playing other sports up until through 8th grade. But once I got to high school, it was sort of just tennis at a competitive level, other than maybe a little pickup hoops and stuff.
Love that. And then I mean, you kind of burst up the rankings because, I'm a little younger than you, but as far as I remember, you you were kind of always number one. Like there wasn't a time. I mean, when did that, when you started playing, when did you see some kind of real breakthrough stuff?
I wasn't always number one in the 12s. I never skipped a step. I remember the first tournament my dad took me to. We didn't even know how to read a draw at the time. It was 10 and unders. And I played this match. I think I won my first, lost the second match. And I get off the court, and my dad said, Paul, I just looked. You know that you just lost to the fourth best player in the entire state of Maryland? And we were blown away. And it was a close match. And so then just went from state tournaments to sectional, and then was invited to play some national tournaments. And so was in the top 15 or so in the 12s, started to make top five or so in the 14s, and then Easter Bowl 16s. I won that, and then um, had some decent success around starting, I guess, 16 or so years old.
And then when that, I mean, when that happens, when you're kind of in that top echelon, are you thinking college, just to transition? I want to talk a little bit about what your process was. There wasn't any ICL, there wasn't really anything else. So when you hit that elite level, 16 plus, um, were you thinking pro, or, what was that decision for you, and how did that kind of, what was your thought process and your process?
Yeah, so one of the things I felt like was really valuable about the way I came up, first of all, my parents didn't know anything really about tennis, and so they were learning along the way, and were just always real supportive. They saw that it was a passion of mine. They never forced me to do anything, and they just were really, really supportive. So I really valued that. But then, going to just sort of a regular school and getting my tennis in after school, I didn't always have as much time on the court as some of my peers, but man, did I try to make that hour and a half, or 2 hours, whatever it may be on that given day productive. And I think it really helped with time management, which would benefit me for the rest of my life. Little did I know then. And so that I think was really helpful. And then I was fortunate. I won Kalamazoo in the 16s, but then each of the years in the 18s. And so the first time I won Kalamazoo in the 18s, you get a wild card into the
Yeah.
U.S. Open. And for me, it was just the experience. And 20 of my buddies from high school came up, and I got my tail handed to me first round, and it was very much a learning experience. Didn't have any thoughts about going on tour at that point, but then was able over the next year to get exposed to a lot more professional tennis and world sort of ITF world tennis, and was top 10 or so, top five. I think I got to six or so ITF, playing a somewhat limited schedule. Went back for Kalamazoo the next year, and won Kalamazoo again, so got another chance to play the U.S. Open. But at the same time, I had two older brothers. They didn't play tennis, but they both went to college, and were just really, they were having a blast. And so I was always excited about college. And then, so the summer I turned 18, I won Kalamazoo, also got into the U.S. Open. So I think there was 2 years in a row in 93, 94. I was the youngest player in the Open. But I lost again in straight sets, certainly more competitive than I was the year before. But for me, one, I was excited about the college experience, not just the tennis aspect of it, but just the holistic um, growth opportunity from a physical and emotional standpoint. Just excited, and it was excited to have fun, and it was so fun. We'll get to that, but I also just didn't think I was ready to make an impact at the tour level the way I felt like I needed to justify turning down the opportunity to go to college. And so, what does that look like to me? Uh, certainly wasn't as competitive as I felt like I needed to be at the Open. Had gone to some futures 15K equivalents today, and done pretty well, quarters, that kind of thing. But to me, to really be ready to make an impact, I think your semis, finals, almost every future you play, and really starting to make quarter semis of challengers as well. And I certainly wasn't doing that at the time. But I think the prevailing and more significant thing for me was just being excited to go to college. I remember, there's a certain amount of prize money I was able to accept and retain eligibility at the U.S. Open, and I took zero. I just didn't want anything to interfere. And in retrospect, one of the more stupid things you could do, but I was just that excited to get to college, and just didn't want anything getting in the way of that.
Love that. I mean, that's great. And I mean, I guess we can bounce around and jump ahead, but obviously there was in our age group, a little bit of that college perception. You got like the Tommy Haas's, the Melisses, the Philippousses who kind of went on, and in that era, the going to college was almost seen not in a negative light, but wasn't really as preparatory as it is today. And now, I mean, that whole thing, we should just jump right to that. I mean, what have you seen over the years from the college level game to now? And you're coming from a very elite standpoint. I mean, you're to win NCAAs 4 years in a row, and some of the names that you played with at Stanford are epic. I mean, everyone here will probably know them, but if you can, yeah, maybe walk us through kind of that journey once you got there, the people you were with, winning that, turning pro, and then maybe how you see today's world, the evolution of the college to pro game.
Okay, I'll start with maybe sort of my journey through college and then remind me to come back to pathway to pros and the difference between perhaps now and 10, 15, 20, and even 30 years ago.
For
So
sure.
remind me on that. And then a quick just interlude here. Please, I would much prefer this to be a dialogue. If there are ever any questions, throw them in the chat. Happy to
Yep.
answer. Would want this to be as productive and purposeful for those listening as possible.
Yep.
So please don't hesitate to come out, reach out with questions or put them in the chat. My journey at Stanford was just phenomenal. I went to Stanford. I had 4 years there. I was very fortunate. The year I got there, the year prior, a friend of mine, and one of the reasons I went to Stanford, a friend named Jeff Salzenstein, had completed his sophomore year the year before I got there. And Stanford made the NCAA finals that year, and he was playing in that match against USC, and it came down to him and Jonathan Leach, one set for the NCAA team title. All the other matches had finished just when he was playing his, had just split sets. So it's one set for the title between these two guys. And Jeff, unfortunately, lost that match. Kudos to John Leach, who's a great guy and a friend. Came through. And so when I got there, that's a heartbreak for Jeff at the time. And he's such a good person. And when I got there, it just felt like the whole freshman year was, let's do this thing for Jeff. Let's do this thing for Jeff. And we had a strong team. And for me, my freshman year in college was not dissimilar to my like first year or rookie year on tour, in which everything was new. I didn't know any better. I'm meeting new people, I'm seeing new places, and it was just a blur, but incredibly fun. But we took care of business on the tennis court, and we became, I don't know, the third or fourth team in NCAA tennis history to go undefeated. And so we had my first year, we went undefeated. Second year, a similar group. For me, again, not dissimilar to my time on tour, that second year on tour, I think is your hardest year and also sophomore year of college, because things aren't new anymore. You don't have that novelty anymore. You don't have that rush of the novelty and the newness. There's more now expectations, and the book is out on you, and people know maybe how to play you. And so I struggled throughout my 4 years. I'd say my sophomore years when I struggled the most. Fortunately, excellent teams, and we were able to win the national championship again. Then we had some turnover my junior year, and Mike and Bob Bryan came in, and we just had a blast with them. And we had 2 straight years of playing with Mike and Bob. My junior, senior year were their freshman, sophomore year, and we won the title my junior year. And then senior year was just an incredibly special time. We not only went undefeated, but one dual match between two schools is 7 cumulative points. You can win 7-0, 6-1, 5-2, 4-3. And over the course of a season, 28 dual matches, our team surrendered 3 points as a team the whole season. So outscored our opponents 173-3. So that was sort of unprecedented from a statistical standpoint. And it was just a blast. And we all got along together so well. And I'll never forget when we huge credit to the coaches that I played for, Dick Gould and John Whitlinger. Coach Gould is just a legend, 38 years, 17 NCAA titles. And I'll never forget when I started, he said, Paul, you don't understand. Your 4 years in school doesn't happen. Your chemistry, your culture was as good as I've had it in 38 years. So just don't expect that. And at the time, I'm thinking to myself, come on, it can't be that hard. And turns out every year is different and there are challenges for sure. But we had a really special run there. through my time at Stanford. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, as successful as we were on the court, my enjoyment of my time off the court, in the classroom, socializing with people who had nothing to do with tennis, was equally as important and equally as enjoyable. And my best friends in the world today, while I just saw Bob a couple of days ago in New York and spent a lot of time with him, so we're really close with my friends from the team. Some of my best friends in the world were not on the team at all. And it's just an experience in 4 years that you never can get back. And so I really valued that time.
I agree. That's amazing. And a big shout out to Salzy's been on as an ICL champion. I think he's done a couple webinars already for us. And yeah, I mean as good as it gets, right? As well as Mike and Bob. So we're keeping the Stanford tradition alive. I mean, pretty amazing stuff. And that I mean, you make me want to go. I feel like we should do Rodney Dangerfield, and I'll go back to school. You're
Yes,
definitely getting my head spinning that
triple
that
ended.
that is no, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And for everyone here, we had a couple questions, comments coming in, but really, that is such a special time. And I think in other sports you hear that as well, whether it's football, that there's just a different that team environment. You talk, Ben Shelton still talks about, even his 1 year at Florida. You talk about the Isners of the world, and a lot is going on now in this discussion about college versus the pros. And at ICL, we're fortunate to have a lot of the top players, with similar resumes to you that are looking at it. So I think, just you obviously have a biased opinion being a great coach and building a great team, but how have you seen the level, in college change? How would you talk about what the environment is like, and just advice, to parents out there about, that decision and what college tennis can do for you?
Yeah, so talk a little bit about sort of pathway to professional tennis. And you mentioned earlier in the discussion, Kirk, that it seemed like there wasn't, or their perception was that if you go to college that you couldn't make it on tour at a time when we were growing up. But I think it's sort of cyclical, and I'll go back to 1977, June of 1977. A guy named John McEnroe graduated high school, and he was headed over to Wimbledon to play in the juniors. And he got there a week early, and he said, "Well, I'll just play in the qualies of the men's event, and then I'll stay over to play in the juniors." And he won a couple matches in qualies, got himself in the main draw, still planning on playing juniors, wins his first round, still planning on playing juniors, goes all the way through to the semis of the men's tournament. So didn't play the juniors, but made semis. And was, played a little bit the rest of that summer, and was 30 in the world, not 30 ITF, was 30 in the world come September of 1977. And he enrolled at Stanford in September of 1977. And so clearly there was a pathway at that point. And he played a year, and his team went undefeated, and he won the NCAAs. And then he went on to obviously have
John
an
McEnroe.
incredible career, be John McEnroe. But there was a time when that was considered a path, and he wasn't alone. Stan Smith played college tennis, Elliot Telcher, you name it, um, Arthur Ashe. So, but then there was a time, I think you're not wrong. There was a perception at the time that we were sort of growing up in the juniors, that it was a little bit more of an either or. Either you go play professional tennis or you go to college, but you're not doing both. And I think that has been completely replaced by and, right?
Hmm.
Going to college is a pathway towards professional tennis. We're seeing it more and more now. In my view, the biggest change in the game over the last 10, 15 years has as much to do, or 20 years, less about the rackets and more about the string, in this polymono string that everybody uses now. It just allows you to put a much more violent swing on the ball. And so with that, the physicality of the game has increased tremendously, both on the men's and women's side. And so what does that mean? It means we're seeing players, both on the men's and women's side, having some of their best success when they're more physically mature. Jessica Pegula breaking through to her first Grand Slam final at 30 years old this year. And there are countless examples like that. Obviously, Novak, Roger, Rafa continuing to have the success they were having well into their 30s. And so I just think you're not able to have continuous, sustained success on tour without physical maturity. And so there's an opportunity in those prime ages of 18 to 22 to develop and to grow, both physically and emotionally. And for me, it's just really difficult to be successful on tour until you're ready to make an impact, which means until you're ready to win matches. Are you winning 3 of every 4 matches you play on tour? If not, I think you're not quite ready to sort of have that breakthrough. And having the opportunity to go to college with amazing facilities, coaches right there, teammates is an opportunity to continue to develop. Uh, and, you know, any good college coach will say, um, it's a great thing for your program to have someone come through the program, even if it's only for a year, even if it's only for 2 years. And by the way, Shelton went to Florida for 2 years. But to have that kind of success on tour after being in school, even if it's only 2 years, um, it's a great thing for the program because you're developing um, players who are able to compete at the highest level, and that's the type of programs you want to run. We've had 2 players in the last 2 years, or last several years, go pro before finishing their 4 years, and one who's considering it now, who's already 250 in the world ATP, but also considering coming back to school for another quarter or two. So I definitely think there's a pathway. And at the same time, look, is it Mensick who's 60 in the world now and 18 years old? Nobody's going to say that he should be going to college. I mean, he's having tremendous success and he is making an impact before, turning 18 and before going where he otherwise would go to college. He's making the right decision. Alex Mickelson was ready to go to college, broke through finals in Newport, guy's top 100 in the world. Nobody's begrudging that decision. I think in his case, he made the right call.
Yeah. No, it's so, and what's great is as a coach for you, I mean, you can see that. I mean, it's great for the program and it just depends on the person. But I want to get to a couple questions here. And how college players have changed in the past decade. Wow, my kids just came in. Hey guys. I
Hello.
I just got ramrolled by Annabelle
I'd
who
say it's
jumped
very
in.
hello. Wow,
Yes.
that's the
Okay.
highlight of the call right there.
They did just hop right in. Okay, guys. Um, hey guys.
I'd say
Hey
the
guys.
answer to that question is very similar to the answer of how the game is developed on tour, and that the players in college are just more physical than at any point. And I think the depth of high level college tennis is better, more significant than when I was in college. There are more quality players going down the line. And it's, with some great examples this year. You take an Elliot Pizziri who just finished University of Texas, just graduated in June, 2 months later, qualifies at the US Open and plays a really tough first round match. And so in order to have that kind of success, you just need to develop physically. And I think that's what you're seeing in the college game as well.
Okay. I mean, again, and parents can come in here and we'll kind of switch gears. Well, we have a couple kind of just coaching questions. Is what was the true driving force that kept you going even when you have negative thoughts or comments? So you were always known as an incredibly tough mental competitor. I mean, you were able to, you didn't see a lot of outbursts, but that's a really good question.
Well, the perception of being a tough, good, strong mental player is just because I didn't have much talent. So the strokes were nothing that you would want to copy. So if you're going to have any sort of success, it must be due to something else. Um, I think the best way I could describe it, and it really didn't resonate with me while I was going through it, but it does now as a coach. And I'll tell a story. I used to get asked this question a lot, and part of my journey, I played 10 years of professional tennis, and then I went to work for 7 years after graduating from Stanford, and then 10 years on tour to working in the corporate world at a clean technology firm before getting back into tennis and coaching. And while I was there, I would ask this question of anyone I'd interview, and do you hate to lose or do you love to win? And obviously, there's really no wrong answer there. Some people love to win, some people hate to lose. At a time, I really felt like I was a hate to lose person, just feeling like that was the driving force or motivating factor. You're so sick to your stomach and gutted when you lose a close match. And I certainly remember my top 5 matches I'd like to have back on tour more than the top 5 wins because
Yeah.
those stick with you more. And so I always felt like that was a stronger driving force, a stronger motivating factor. But then a couple years ago, I saw an interview with Kobe Bryant before he passed. And Kobe got asked the same question. Kobe, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? And he sits back and he goes, nah, nah, neither. What do you mean neither? You got to choose one or the other. He's like, nah, I find there are weaknesses to both of those. I love to figure it out.
Mhm.
I love to learn. And golly, that hit me so hard. That hit me so hard and resonated with me really strongly. And it felt like, and as I looked back on my career, that was the ultimate driving force. I felt like when I had success, all it made me want to do um, is continue to get better so I could have that feeling again. And I just love to figure it out. I love to learn. I mean, one of the most impressive things about Roger, Rafa, Novak, I'm sure all of them, all the champions, but they're getting better. They're tweaking things at
All
this stage in their career. I just saw a clip today of Yannick Sinner. His service motion has changed each of the last 3 years. And so the tweaks that you make, the development that you make, and certainly as you get to the higher level, it's the percent here and the percent there. And so I think to answer the question for me, that driving force is loving to learn.
That's a phenomenal. That's not just a Stanford answer, although it does sound good coming from you while you're as a Stanford Cardinal. There's another one about, when I just keeping that mental side up. What do you have to say to someone who thinks they aren't good enough against their friends and peers? That's always a tough one, right? I mean, this is a big journey, but I think it's an independent journey, and so to measure yourself gets tricky.
It is. And you talk about measuring yourself, you talk about a lot of like comparisons that you might make, that anyone might make with peers. Um, Gosh, I think it sounds somewhat easy or cliche-ish, but I think the most important thing that any of us can do is really focus on the things that we can control.
Mhm.
And the truth is we really don't have total control over our wins and losses, our results, our outcomes, because there's so many other factors that come into play, including an opponent. Uh, but what you can control is your process. You can control your preparation. You can control um, how you approach a match. You can control how you respond to adversity throughout the match. You can control how you respond to adversity in life, external factors, injuries that might impact how you would prepare or um, how successful you might be. Those are the things that we can control, and that's what I would have everyone, if possible, be hyper focused about.
I love that. I mean, that's spoken like a great coach. Um, let's get a little bit into Stanford. That transition now, you had an awesome career. Like you said, 10 years on tour, 7 years in the working world. When you came back to coaching, and I think we're allowed to, again, we're all in compliance here. We're not about plugging and recruiting, but Stanford is a very unique, unbelievable institution. And giving a little bit of advice to families who are starting to go through the process of thinking through, you know, breakthroughs in the juniors, and what would you recommend, and talk a little bit about your experience from being a Stanford player to now being a coach and being embedded in the administration. What's great about it, what advice you might have for people on their journey that set Stanford as their goal.
Sure, I appreciate the question. So I'd go back to just when I was a high school student. I was looking for a place that combined excellence in both athletics and academics. And the reason for that is I was passionate about my sport and wanted to continue to develop. But the truth is, if I have a 10-year professional tennis career after graduating college, I'm 32 years old and I have a 40 or 50-year life ahead of me. And I just felt that the experience of going to a place like Stanford, the network that you would establish, the individuals that you would meet by being there can benefit you not just for the next 4 years of your life if you're in high school, but truly for the next 40 or 50. And so that was something that resonated with me. In terms of advice, I wouldn't talk necessarily just about Stanford, but any of the high academic institutions that anyone might be considering. And there's several criteria that I think any school would be looking at, and that is probably first and foremost is your your transcript, your academic performance, not just the GPA, but how much rigor there is to your course load. And what I mean by that is if ICL is offering AP level classes, particularly as you get into junior senior year, that you're challenging yourself and taking increasing the rigor of your course load and taking some of those AP level classes. And performing strong in school. Typically, the recommendation is to
Oh, did we lose a little bit about? Uh-oh. Paul, did we lose you? Can everybody hear me? We might have just encountered some technical difficulty. All right, so everyone can still hear.
SAP, CT score is important. Um,
I think we lost you for a couple seconds. You cut
all
out
right.
before. So we'll
Am I
go back.
back? Or
Yes, you were giving advice to any top school. So you're talking a little bit
any
about.
high academic institution, increase the rigor of your course load as you go through your high school career, particularly as you get to junior, senior year, to incorporate some AP level classes in your curriculum, which ICL offers. And I know this because my daughter was an ICL student as well. Um, and often the recommendation is taking 5 academic courses per semester. That's usually a math, a science, an English, a foreign language, and a social science like a history. Um, and ways that you can distinguish yourself to any institution would be certainly with academic performance, certainly with athletic ability if you're an achievement, if you're a recruited student athlete, and then let's see, SAT or ACT scores, which are now coming back into being required at many of these high academic institutions. And then finally, you're going to write an essay and fill out an application and to show that you have some intellectual vitality there to the admissions department. It's sort of your job interview for any admissions department. Uh, and
What else do you look for? I mean, I guess personally, we talk a lot about leadership at ICL. We talk a lot about how you can distinguish yourself amongst a team, character. You see all the best players in the country and around the world. What are some of the qualities that you look for as a coach, specifically that may surprise people?
loving to learn, loving to figure it out, passion for the game. It's the last part might sound a little cliche-ish, but the reason that's important is because I don't care who you are, I don't care where you go, you're gonna have ups and downs, and you're gonna have downs. And you just go to Rogers' commencement address at Dartmouth a couple of months ago, where he's the best to ever do it. Okay, with respect to Djokovic and Nadal. He won 80% of his matches on tour. Phenomenal. He won 54% of his points on tour. That's the best to ever do it. You're going to fail half the time. Half the time. So do you love it enough to keep going even though you're failing? Um, and so that's why that is important. And then I think it's such a unique transition for anyone in an individual sport, tennis, golf, especially to go from being an individual athlete throughout your junior career, high school career, to being on a team for the first time and being a good teammate. And what does that look like? 3 of the characteristics that we look for are humility, hunger, and smarts. And so those are the things that I think are some of the characteristics that are most important to me. And being smart doesn't necessarily mean just book smart. It's how you approach the game. It's how you approach preparation. It's decisions that you make on the court. It's decisions that you make off the court. And so it really encapsulates quite a bit.
I mean, that is well said. I mean, we obviously get it all the time, and so much about being a true college preparatory school. We always hope and look for, you mentioned time management. We talk a lot about energy management. Maybe you can talk a little about what a schedule is like, because being a student at a university and being a student athlete at a top tier university are very, very different. So maybe you can talk about what the sort of expectations, what's a schedule like for a student athlete at a Stanford or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think a student athlete anywhere is most important thing is gonna be how you manage your time. Um, for me, there's sort of 3 pillars. There is your athletics your sport, your school, and your social life. And honestly, all three are really important. And the social life, I'm very deliberate in saying that. I want my team members to enjoy their time. And you're going to be surrounded by just phenomenal people wherever you go. And to embrace that and enjoy time off the court, away from your sport, with peers, I think you just never get this time back, and is really important. Uh, but you're going to have a lot more on your plate than any regular student. And so you have to be very efficient with your time. And so that's challenging. And certainly your first semester, quarter at a school, I think there could be some transition. I hear a lot of from a lot of sort of freshmen, first year students who've been coming from an ICL, how excited they are to get back into like a physical classroom again.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it's just the time management and how important that is. And communication. Communicate with your coaches. Coach, I've got 2 midterms tomorrow. I need today off of practice. No problem. Communicate with your professors. Professor Kirk, I know we've got a big midterm tomorrow, but we're playing, our biggest conference matches. I'm going to be on the road. Can I get any, lecture notes? I want to be prepared to take it. Can I take the test on the road? Whatever it may be. Just communicate early and often is so important.
I love you
And
said
these are
that.
skills that if you develop during college, they are going to benefit you the rest of your life, no matter what you do.
I mean, we stress all the time, over communicating is not a bad thing.
Yep.
And I think that those communication skills with coaches, with teachers, with peers is a big part of it. And I think, that battle of choosing, as you mentioned, an online school to be ready for, I think there's a socialization. I mean, when you're in the sport, you're around people, but just getting back to that grind at a top school has, because these are institutions where the education is, number one, and your team is probably is equal. There's a lot there. I guess I want to go back to some questions, because we have a lot of people on here. So please throw into the chat or the Q&A any questions that you have,
I see a
because
question around sort of a typical day or training schedule.
yeah.
I think you'd find at pretty much any school, uh, a balance between school and the tennis training. For us, we like to try to have a balance between getting the whole team together on the court for practice and doing individual or small group work. And so I'd say about 3 times a week in an ideal quarter. We're on quarters, not semesters, so you can kind of use those interchangeably. Um, I like to have small groups or individuals throughout the day, maybe 3 times a week. And then twice a week, we bring the whole team together for building team chemistry. Um, and typically when we built and practicing doubles, which is really important in collegiate tennis. And so when we bring the whole team together, often we're making it really competitive and practice sets, practice matches. You win, you move up, you lose, you move down, and just keeping the energy really, really high. Uh, and we're on court anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours a day. And then there's an additional hour, 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what you're doing, of either conditioning or sort of strength work in the gym. And we're doing gym workouts about 3 days a week, maybe some off court fitness or cardio twice a week. As we get into the season a little bit more, that off court stuff might come down a little bit just because you're traveling a little bit more for competition. Um, but that's what a typical quarter would look like, I think.
And that's what's interesting. I mean, the schedules change as well. So is a college tennis season, if you could break that down, what is a college, if I come in, what does that look like?
Yeah, and it's changing this year. We're about to start a 2 year pilot program of having the NCAA individual singles and doubles championships in mid to late November. First time ever. Historically, the NCAA's team championship has been in mid to late May, and immediately following that was the NCAA individuals. This is the first year collegiate tennis is host or house or conducting the individual championships in November. And so you can really just think of 2 seasons. Individuals all fall, which is not unlike a tennis tournament that you're normally playing in. You just, if there's two Stanford players, they wouldn't meet first round. They probably wouldn't meet a couple of rounds in, but you could compete against a teammate in an individual tournament. And then the spring season, which is really mid to late January through May, is just dual matches, team competition.
They're doing away with the singles and that's a big
In the
move
spring, they're still having it, but just doing it in the fall.
in the fall. In the
So
fall.
there's the big challenge there is you just have so much fewer opportunities to qualify for NCAA singles and doubles because it's really just 3 or 4 tournaments in the fall to see who qualifies for the individual championships. Whereas it used to be, 3, 4 in the fall, but then 20 some dual matches to establish a ranking.
So interesting. Well, back on James is asking a question here about if you guys do some of the any mental training.
Yeah, we have a sports psychology department and individuals from that department assigned to our team. Our guys have resource availability to those resources throughout. We'll do occasionally some team group sessions with our coach, some of our mental coach, some of our players come in having with a established relationship with a sports psychologist, and we're very supportive of them continuing to do that work on their own with someone externally as well.
So interesting. Obviously the mental side and being a coach. I mean, I guess if you want to just because as we're running out of time, get under the hood about coaching. Tell us a little about your journey going from player to coach, and now you've been coaching for over a decade. Any tips, anything you've seen, anything that you think sticks out with players, any stories of, great growth that you've seen or, because you have to kind of manage the physical, mental, and emotional part of this team dynamic of, of taking individual hot shots around the country, molding them into a team, um, perspective that you've gotten in your 10 years.
Yeah, Kirk, hang on to that question. I see a question in the chat, and I want to clarify. Maria asked at the collegiate level during the fall, tennis players solely play doubles in the spring singles start. That is incorrect, and I apologize for not being more clear. In the fall, you play individual tournaments, and in those tournaments are both singles and doubles. So you play singles and doubles throughout the fall, but you play in tournaments as opposed to a dual match. One dual match, in the dual match season, you also play singles and doubles, starts in late January. One dual match between two schools, Stanford and North Carolina. You start with 3 doubles pro sets, and whoever wins 2 of those 3 matches, or all 3, gets 1 point. Followed by the doubles pro sets, you have 6 singles matches, 2 out of 3 sets. Each one of those singles matches counts for 1 point. And so that's when the dual match season happens in the spring, January to May. And the fall is individuals, but it's both singles and doubles. I hope that's clearer, and I apologize for
Yeah.
not being more clear before.
Thank
Um,
you, Maria.
let's see. Your question, Kirk. Coaching. I
Yeah.
never felt like I was the most talented guy. I felt like I worked really hard, a little bit of the Rudy in me. And so because of that, I always felt like it was a good transition into trying to figure the game out and being a decent coach. Certainly the mental aspect is probably the most important aspect of it, and also the most sort of the least tangible and the hardest to grasp. If anyone had the formula to put in a bottle of how to develop confidence and mental toughness, that person would be a gazillionaire. And it's so fluid and challenging.
They'd probably come out of Stanford.
One of the things that I find is really important between any coach student, their relationship, I think it's critical for a coach and student to be, or coach and player to be on the same page with what that player's strengths are. Because once you identify what that is, the whole goal is to try to impose your strengths on your opponent as often as you possibly can. Um, One of the things that I think we all do, certainly I do as a coach, Try to be mindful of it, but we often um, spend so much time on the practice court trying to improve what might be perceived as a weakness. And certainly some of our time should be devoted to that. But I think the majority of the time should be continuing to hone and strengthen your strengths. And the reason for that is, let's say I've got a good forehand, and it's a bad example because I certainly didn't. I've got a good forehand and my backhand's a little bit weaker. If I spend all my practice time hitting backhands, I get so accustomed to hitting backhands, I could find myself getting into a match and running around my forehand to hit my weaker shot. Really, if I got a big forehand, I want to be making my opponent deal with what I do best as often as I possibly can. So getting on the same page is critical, and then just being relentless about imposing your strengths on your opponent as often as you can once you get into competition.
I love that. Being relentless is huge. Well, I think to wrap it up, um, two things. One is if you could go back to 15-year-old Paul, any advice? What would you be what would you be talking to the, that freshman to sophomore in high school, Paul?
Uh, I'll say it feels really difficult to answer this question without feeling either corny or somewhat cliche-ish. But here's the thing I think I'd say. While it's while I was driven and loved to work hard and was relentless about the process and loved it, I think the only I would continue to do that. Like I love working hard. I don't know any other way. Continue to do that. But I think what I would share with my 15-year-old self is that everything I do is not as consequential as it seems in the moment.
That is so poignant because pretty much for the most part, when I've asked that question to a Monica Seles, other people, world champions, Kerry Walsh, basically the same answer. Hey, relax. Like take a deep breath. I think perspective gives you a lot of information. I mean, obviously being a parent changes your perception, and being a coach and a parent, you see the anxiety build up. So no, that's really it's not super cliche. It's kind of easier
And
said than
just telling someone to relax is tough. Relax, it actually probably make them more frustrated, and then they might get frustrated that they're not relaxing. But just the outcome, you're going to have so many of them, and just what you do in that moment, and you should put every ounce of effort and purpose and intention into it. But the result of that thing, whatever it is you're dealing with at that moment, is not as consequential as it seems in that moment.
which is so interesting coming from a coach when, I mean, just to laugh at a situation, when you walk around at like an Orange Bowl and someone sees you, that's the coach of Stanford. Like I remember playing Orange Bowl and like the college coaches are buzzing. It's hard to put that off. It's like it's almost the intimidator, right? Like, oh, the college coaches are watching me. But I think learning that, right? Learning that, and you'll probably agree with, one of our partners, Dr. Lair, and you've probably known Dr. Lair for many, many, many years. And
Best, the most
uh,
important 3 days of my life or my tennis
HPI,
career was spent with him.
HPI, and he really came out at orientation and said, it's about Yoda, about your being your own decision advisor, how to be your own inner coach. And again, easier said than done, but having coaches help. And you kind of covered all the six P's there because that perspective and personalization is key. And I think, I'll wrap it up. I'd like you to wrap it up, but I'll kind of wrap up my words by saying that let's just not beat around the bush. There's something so incredibly special about Stanford sports, about Stanford, um, just the entire ethos, right? Of being there, to be in the hub of where technology is created, and the vibrance of, we could have gone on a tangent about while you were winning NCAs, how many founders of companies were hatching ideas in the late 90s, there's pretty remarkable. So you know, I want to say for you to give your time to help us. You've been a big believer in ICL and what we're trying to build, and you're a true example of an ICL champion who's sort of checked all those incredible boxes, not just in accolades, but in your character and your coach, the way you coach, the way you lead your team and others. So I just want to say thank you. It's great to have you as a friend from seeing you for so many years. And, you've seen a local DC boy doing okay right now with Francis, carrying the torch. Probably pretty cool to see, as well. Seeing a lot of Washington locals there with Mark Ein and everyone in the box. And so, we wish you all the best. We want to, keep our relationship going. But I want to kind of pass the floor on to you if there are any last bit of words, advice. You have parents, you have students on here, and I'm pretty much dreaming about playing for you.
No, I just want to say thank you, Kirk, for having me. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone who was on the call and listened, indulged me to listen to what I had to say. Um, I think I've given all the advice anyone could want to hear for 1 hour, but appreciate you. And I guess I guess I'd leave it with this. From my perspective, uh, caring deeply about something makes for a richer life experience, and it makes for potentially more disappointment if things don't work out. But pursuing something to the best of your ability, from my perspective, just makes for a richer life experience. And so that's a characteristic that I really value.
It's great. Coach, thank you. Good luck. This is gonna be an interesting one. It's a whole different style of season in a way.
Yeah, the fall's going
Wow.
to be different for sure.
All
Kirk, I
right.
appreciate you. Thanks to everybody, and I
Thanks,
hope
everybody.
our paths cross again soon.
Absolutely. Take care of all. Thanks so much.